We must stop debating crime policy as though it were purely about crime. People must come to understand the racial history and origins of mass incarceration. The many ways our conscious and unconscious biases have distorted our judgments over the years about what is fair, appropriate, and constructive when responding to drug use and drug crime. We must come to see, too, how our economic insecurities and racial resentments have been exploited for political gain, and how this manipulation has caused suffering for people of all colors. Finally, we must admit out loud that it was because of race that we didn't care much what happened to those people and imagine the worst possible things about them. The fact that our lack of care and concern may have been, at times, unintentional or unconscious does not mitigate our crime if we refuse when given the chance to make amends.
A Lesson Before Dying by Ernest J. Gaines. Excerpt. I was not there, yet I was there. No, I did not go to the trial. I did not hear the verdict, because I knew all the time what it would be. Still, I was there. I was there as much as anyone else was there. Either I sat behind my aunt and his godmother, or I sat beside them. Both are large women, but his godmother is larger. She is of average height, 5'4" or 5'5", but weighs nearly 200 pounds. Once she and my aunt had found their places, 2 rows behind the table where he sat with his court-appointed attorney, his godmother became as immobile as a great stone, or as one of our oak or cypress stumps. She never got up once to get water or to go to the bathroom down in the basement. She just sat there staring at the boy's clean-cropped head where he sat at the front table with his lawyer. Even after he had gone to await the jury's verdict, her eyes remained in that one direction. She heard nothing said in the courtroom, not by the prosecutor, not by the defense attorney, not by my aunt. Oh yes, she did hear one word for sure: hog. It was my aunt whose eyes followed the prosecutor as he moved from one side of the courtroom to the other, pounding his fists into the palm of his hand, pounding the table where his papers lay, pounding the rail that separated the jurors from the rest of the courtroom. It was my aunt who followed his every move, not his godmother. She was not even listening. She had gotten tired of listening. She knew, as we all knew, what the outcome would be. A white man had been killed during a robbery, and though 2 of the robbers had been killed on the spot, one had been captured, and he too would have to die. Though he told them no, he had nothing to do with it, that he was on his way to the White Rabbit Bar and Lounge where Brother and Bear drove him beside him and offered him a ride. After he got into the car, they asked him if he had any money. When he told them he didn't have a solitary dime, it was then that Brother and Bear started talking credit, saying that old Gropay should not mind crediting them a pint since he knew them well, and he knew that the grinding season was coming soon, and they would be able to pay him back then. The store was empty except for the old storekeeper, Alcee Gropay, who sat on a stool behind the counter. He spoke first. He asked Jefferson about his godmother. Jefferson told him his Nanan was all right. Old Gropay nodded his head. "You tell her for me I said hello," he told Jefferson. He looked at Brother and Bear. He didn't like them. He didn't trust them. Jefferson could see in his face. "Do for you, boys?" he asked. "A bottle of that apple white there, Mr. Gropay," Bear said. Old Gropay got the bottle off the shelf, but he did not set it on the counter. He could see that the boys had already been drinking, and he became suspicious. "You boys got money?" he asked. Brother and Bear spread out all the money they had in their pockets on top of the counter. Old Gropay counted it with his eyes. "That's not enough," he said. "Come on now, Mr. Gropay," they pleaded with him. "You know you're going to get your money as soon as grinding start." "No," he said, "money is slack everywhere. You bring the money, you get your wine." He turned to put the bottle back on the shelf. One of the boys, the one called Bear, started around the counter. "You stop there," Gropay told him. "Go back." Bear had been drinking and his eyes were glossy. He walked unsteadily, grinning all the time as he continued around the corner. "Go back," Gropay told him. "I mean the last time. Now go back." Bear continued. Gropay moved quickly toward the cash register, where he withdrew a revolver and started shooting. Soon there was shooting from another direction. When it was quiet again, Bear, Gropay, and Brother were all down on the floor, and only Jefferson was standing. He wanted to run, but he couldn't run. He couldn't even think. He didn't know what he was. He didn't know where he was. He didn't know how he'd gotten there. He couldn't remember ever getting into the car. He couldn't remember a thing he'd done all day. He heard a voice calling. He thought the voice was coming from the liquor shelves. Then he realized that old Gropay was not dead and that it was he who was calling. He made himself go to the end of the counter. He had to look across Bear to see the storekeeper. Both lay between the counter and the stacks of alcohol. Several bottles had broken, and alcohol and blood covered their bodies as well as the floor. He stood there gaping at the old man slumped against the bottom shelf of gallons and half-gallons of wine. He didn't know whether he should go to him or whether he should run out of there. The old man continued to call, "Boy, boy, boy." Jefferson became frightened. The old man was still alive. He had seen him. He would tell on him. Now he started babbling. It wasn't me, Mr. Gropay. It was Brother and Bear. Brother shot you. It wasn't me. They made me come with them. You've got to tell the law that, Mr. Gropay. You hear me, Mr. Gropay?" But he was talking to a dead man. Still, he did not run. He didn't know what to do. He didn't believe that this has happened. Again, he couldn't remember how he'd gotten there. He didn't know whether he had come there with Brother and Bear, or whether he had walked in and seen all this after it happened. He looked from one dead body to the other. He didn't know whether he should call someone on the telephone or run. He had never dialed a telephone in his life, but he had seen other people use them. He didn't know what to do. He was standing by the liquor shelf, and suddenly he realized he needed a drink, and he needed it badly. He snatched a bottle off the shelf, wrung off the cap, and turned up the bottle all in one continuous motion. The whiskey burned him like fire, his chest, his belly, even his nostrils. His eyes watered. He shook his head to clear his mind. Now he began to realize where he was. Now he began to realize fully what had happened. Now he knew he had to get out of there. He turned. He saw money in the cash register under the little wire clamps. He knew taking the money was wrong. His nana told him never to steal. He didn't want to steal. But he didn't have a solitary dime in his pocket, and nobody was around, so who could say he stole it? Surely not one of the dead men. He was halfway across the room, the money stuffed inside his jacket pocket, the half bottle of whiskey clutched in his hand, when two white men walked into the store. That was his story. The prosecutor's story was different. The prosecutor argued that Jefferson and the other two had gone there with the full intention of robbing the old man and killing him so that they could not identify him, so that he could not identify them. When the old man and the other two robbers were all dead, this one, it proved, the kind of animal that he really was, stuffed the money into his pocket and celebrated the event by drinking over their still bleeding bodies. The defense argued that Jefferson was innocent of all the charges except being at the wrong place at the wrong time. There was absolutely no proof that there had been a conspiracy between himself and the other two. The fact that Mr. Gropay shot only Brother and Bear was proof of Jefferson's innocence. Why did Mr. Gropay shoot one boy twice and never shoot at Jefferson once? Because Jefferson was merely an innocent bystander. He took the whiskey to calm his nerves, not to celebrate. He took the money out of hunger and plain stupidity. Gentlemen of the jury, look at this boy. I almost said man, but I can't say man. Oh, sure, he's reached the age of 21 when we civilized men consider the male species as reached manhood. But would you call this a man? No, not I. I would call it a boy and a fool. A fool is not aware of right and wrong. A fool does what others tell him to do. A fool got into that automobile. A man with a modicum of intelligence would have seen that those racketeers meant no good. But not a fool. A fool got into that automobile. A fool rode to the grocery store. A fool stood by and watched this happen, not having the sense to run. Gentlemen of the jury, look at him. Look at him. Look at this. Do you see a man sitting here? I ask you, I implore. Look carefully. Do you see a man sitting here? Look at the shape of his skull. This face is flat as the palm of my hand. Look deeply into those eyes. Do you see a modicum of intelligence? Do you see anyone here who could plan a murder, a robbery, can plan anything? A cornered animal to strike quickly out of fear, a trait inherited from his ancestors in the deepest jungle of blackest Africa. Yes, that he can do, but to plan? To plan, gentlemen of the jury. No, gentlemen, this skull here holds no plans. What you see here is a thing that acts on command, a thing to hold the handle of a plow, a thing to load your bales of cotton, a thing to dig your ditches, to chop your wood, to pull your corn. That is what you see here, but you do not see anything capable of planning a robbery or a murder. He does not even know the size of his clothes or his shoes. Ask him to name the months of the year. Ask him, does Christmas come before or after the 4th of July? Mention the names of Keats, Byron, Scott, and see whether the eyes will show one moment of recognition. Ask him to describe a rose, to quote one passage from the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. Gentlemen of the jury, this man planned a robbery? Oh, pardon me, I surely didn't mean to insult your intelligence by saying man. Would you please forgive me for committing such an error? Gentlemen of the jury, who would be hurt if you took this life? Look back to that second row. Please look. I want all 12 of you honorable men to turn your heads and look back to that second row. What you see there has been everything to him. Mama, grandmother, godmother, everything. Look at her, gentlemen of the jury. Look at her well. Take this away from her, and she has no reason to go on living. We may see him not as much, but he's her reason for existence. Think on that, gentlemen. Think on it. Gentlemen of the jury, be merciful. For God's sake, be merciful. He is innocent of all charges brought against him. But let us say he was not. Let us for a moment say he was not. What justice would there be to take this life? Justice, gentlemen. Why, I would just as soon put a hog in the electric chair as this. I thank you, gentlemen, from the bottom of my heart for your kind patience. I have no more to say except this. We must live with our own conscience. Each and every one of us must live with his own conscience. The jury retired, and it returned a verdict after lunch. Guilty of robbery and murder in the first degree. The judge commended the 12 white men for reaching a quick and just verdict. This was Friday. He would pass sentence on Monday. 10 o'clock on Monday, Miss Emma and my aunt sat in the same seats they had occupied on Friday. Reverend Mose Ambrose, the pastor of their church, was with them. He and my aunt sat on either side of Miss Emma. The judge, a short, red-faced man with snow-white hair and thick black eyebrows, asked Jefferson if he had anything to say before the sentencing. My aunt said that Jefferson was looking down at the floor and shook his head. The judge told Jefferson that he had been found guilty of the charges brought against him, and that the judge saw no reason that he should not pay for the part he played in this horrible crime. Death by electrocution. The governor would set the date.
Soaphead was reflecting once again on these thoughts one late hot afternoon when he heard a tap on his door. Opening it, he saw a little girl quite unknown to him. She was about 12 or so, he thought, and seemed to him pitifully unattractive. When he asked her what she wanted, she did not answer, but held out to him one of his cards advertising his gifts and services. If you are overcome with trouble and conditions that are not natural, I can remove them. Overcome spells, bad luck, and evil influences. Remember, I am a true spiritualist and psychic reader, born with power, and I will help you. Satisfaction in one visit. During many years of practice, I have brought together many in marriage and reunited many who were separated. If you are unhappy, discouraged, or in distress, I can help you. Does bad luck seem to follow you? Has the one you love changed? I can tell you why. I will tell you who your enemies and friends are, and if the one you love is true or false. If you are sick, I can show you the way to health. I locate lost and stolen articles. Satisfaction guaranteed. Soaphead Church told her to come in. What can I do for you, my child? She stood there, her hands folded across her stomach, a little protruding pot of tummy. Maybe you can do it for me. Do what for you? I can't go to school no more, and I thought maybe you could help me. Help you how? Tell me, don't be frightened. My eyes. What about your eyes? I want them blue. Soaphead pursed his lips and let his tongue stroke a gold inlay. He thought it was at once the most fantastic and the most logical petition he had ever received. Here was an ugly little girl asking for beauty. A surge of love and understanding swept through him, but was quickly replaced by anger. Anger that he was powerless to help her. Of all the wishes people had brought him, money, love, revenge, this seemed to him the most poignant and the one most deserving of fulfillment. A little black girl who wanted to rise up out of the pit of her blackness and see the world with blue eyes. His outrage grew and felt like power. For the first time, he honestly wished he could work miracles. Never before had he really wanted the true and holy power. Only the power to make others believe he had it. It seemed so sad, so frivolous, that mere mortality, not judgment, kept him from it. Or did it? With a trembling hand, he made the sign of the cross over her. His flesh crawled in that hot, dim little room of worn things. He was chilled. I can do nothing for you, my child. I am not a magician. I work only through the Lord. He sometimes uses me to help people. All I can do is offer myself to him as the instrument through which he works. If he wants your wish granted, he will do it.
When I was 12, my parents had 2 talks with me. One was the usual birds and bees. Well, I didn't really get the usual version. My mom, Lisa, is a registered nurse, and she told me what went where and what didn't need to go here, there, or any damn where else until I was grown. Back then, I doubted anything was going anywhere anyway. While all the other girls sprouted breasts between 6th and 7th grade, my chest was as flat as my back. The other talk was about what to do if a cop stopped me. Mama fussed and told Daddy I was too young for that. He argued that I was too young to get arrested or shot. Star, you do whatever they tell you to do, he said. Keep your hands visible. Don't make any sudden moves. Only speak when they speak to you. I knew it must have been serious. Daddy has the biggest mouth of anybody I know, and if he said to be quiet, I needed to be quiet. I hope somebody had that talk with Khalil. He cusses under his breath, turns down Tupac, and maneuvers the Impala to the side of the street. We're on Carnation, where most of the houses are abandoned and half of the streetlights are busted. Nobody around us but us and the cop. Khalil turns the ignition off. Wonder what this fool wants. The police parks and puts his brights on. I blink to keep from being blinded. I remember seeing something Daddy said. If you're with somebody, you better hope they don't have nothing on them, or both of y'all going down. Okay, you don't have anything in the car, do you? I ask. He watches the cop in the side mirror. Nah. The officer approaches the driver's door and taps the window. Khalil cranks the handle to roll it down. If we weren't blinded enough, the officer beams his flashlight in our faces. License, registration, and proof of insurance. Khalil breaks a rule. He doesn't do what the cop wants. What'd you pull us over for? License, registration, and proof of insurance. I said, what'd you pull us over for? Khalil, I plead. Do what he said. Khalil groans and takes his wallet out. The officer follows his movements with the flashlight. My heart pounds loudly, but Daddy's instructions echo in my head. Get a good look at the cop's face. If you can remember his badge number, that's even better. With the flashlight following Khalil's hands, I make out the numbers on his badge. 115. He's white, mid-30s to early 40s, has a buzz cut and a thin scar over his top lip. Khalil hands the officer his papers and license. 115 looks over them. Where are you two coming from tonight? None of you, Khalil says, meaning none of your business. What you pull me over for? Your tail light's broken. So are you going to give me a ticket or what? Khalil asks. You know what? Get out the car, smart guy. Man, just give me my Get out the car. Hands up where I can see them. Khalil gets out with his hands up. 115 yanks him by his arm and pins him against the back door. I fight to find my voice. He didn't mean hands on the dashboard. The officer barks at me. Don't move. I do what he tells me, but my hands are shaking too much to be still. He pats Khalil down. Okay, smart mouth, let's see what we find on you. You ain't gonna find nothing, Khalil says. 115 pats him down 2 more times. He turns up empty. Stay here, he tells Khalil. And you, he looks in the window at me, don't move. I can't even nod. The officer walks back to his patrol car. My parents haven't raised me to fear the police, just to be smart around them. They told me it's not smart to move while a cop has his back to you. Khalil does. He comes to the door. It's not smart to make a sudden move. Khalil does. He opens the driver's door. You okay, Star? Pow! 1. Khalil's body jerks. Blood splatters from his back. He holds onto the door to keep himself upright. Pow! 2. Khalil gasps. Pow! 3. Khalil looks at me, stunned. He falls to the ground. I'm 10 again and watching Natasha drop. An ear-splitting scream emerges from my gut, explodes in my throat, and uses every inch of me to be heard. Instinct says don't move, but everything else says check on Khalil. I jump out of the Impala and rush around to the other side. Khalil stares at the sky as if he hopes to see God. His mouth is open like he wants to scream. I scream loud enough for the both of us. Hardly anyone files a complaint because the last thing most people want to do after experiencing a frightening and intrusive encounter with the police is to show up at the police station where the officer works and attract more attention to themselves. For good reason. Many people, especially poor people of color, fear police harassment, retaliation, and abuse. After having your car torn apart by the police in a futile search for drugs, or being forced to lie spread-eagled on the pavement while the police search you and interrogate you for no reason at all, how much confidence do you have in law enforcement? Michelle Alexander, The New Jim Crow.
Well, said Gandalf at last, what are you thinking about? Have you decided what to do? No, answered Frodo, coming back to himself out of darkness, and finding to his surprise that it was not dark, and that out of the window he could see the sunlit garden. Or perhaps, yes. As far as I understand what you have said, I suppose I must keep the ring and guard it, at least for the present, whatever it may do to me. Whatever it may do, it will be slow, slow to evil, if you keep it with that purpose, said Gandalf. I hope so, said Frodo, but I hope that you may find some other better keeper soon. But in the meanwhile, it seems that I am a danger to all that live near me, I cannot keep the ring and stay here. I ought to leave Bag End, leave the Shire, leave everything and go away. He sighed. I should like to save the Shire if I could, though there have been times when I thought the inhabitants too stupid and dull for words, and have felt that an earthquake or an invasion of dragons might be good for them. But I don't feel like that now. I feel that as long as the Shire lies behind, safe and comfortable, I shall find wandering more bearable. I shall know that somewhere there is a firm foothold, even if my feet cannot stand there again. Of course, I've sometimes thought of going away, but I imagine that as a kind of holiday, a series of adventures like Bilbo's, or better, ending in peace. But this would mean exile, a flight from danger into danger, drawing it after me, and I suppose I must go alone if I am to do that and save the Shire. But I feel very small and very uprooted and, well, desperate. The enemy is so strong and terrible.
I feel that for white America to understand the significance of the problem of the Negro will take a bigger and tougher America than any we have yet known. I feel that America's past is too shallow, her national character too superficially optimistic, her very morality too suffused with color hate for her to accomplish so vast and complex a task. Culturally, the Negro represents a paradox. Though he is an organic part of the nation, he is excluded by the ride and direction of American culture. Frankly, it is felt to be right to exclude him, and it is felt to be wrong to admit him freely. Therefore, if within the confines of its present culture, the nation ever seeks to purge itself of its color hate, it will find itself at war with itself, convulsed by a spasm of emotional and moral confusion. If the nation ever finds itself examining its real relation to the Negro, it will find itself doing infinitely more than that. For the anti-Negro attitude of whites represents but a tiny part, though a symbolically significant one, of the moral attitude of the nation. Our too young and too new America, lusty because it is lonely, aggressive because it is afraid, insists upon seeing the world in terms of good and bad, the holy and the evil, the high and the low, the white and the black. Our America is frightened of fact, of history, of processes, of necessity. It hugs the easy way of damning those whom it cannot understand, of excluding those who look different, and it salves its consciousness with a self-draped cloak of righteousness. Am I damning my native land? No, for I too share these faults of character, and I really do not think that America, adolescent and cocksure, a stranger to suffering and travail, an enemy of passion and sacrifice, is ready to probe into its most fundamental beliefs.